My husband thought sleeping with the boss's daughter was a promotion strategy, and she believed sending me 50 explicit photos would force a quiet divorce. They forgot that I make my living finding hidden patterns as a forensic accountant. I did not just see heartbreak in those images. I saw insider trading documents scattered on the hotel bed. I am not leaving quietly. I am waiting for her parents' 40th anniversary party to project my most detailed audit report. My name is Elena Ross, and at 39 years old, I have built a reputation in Seattle as the woman you call when the numbers do not add up. My clients are usually corporate boards or divorce attorneys looking for hidden assets, and I find them with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. I live in a glass-walled architectural marvel overlooking the Puget Sound, a house that is as impressive as it is clinically cold, much like the state of my marriage. The silence of the house was shattered at 2:14 in the morning. It was not a ringtone, but the aggressive, insect-like buzzing of a phone vibrating against the teak nightstand. I reached for it in the dark. My husband, Derek, was supposed to be in Chicago for a leadership conference, a lie he had delivered with a practiced kiss on my forehead 2 days ago. But the notification light blinking in the darkness was not from him. It was a series of messages from a number I had saved under intern years ago, though now the contact belonged to Kylie Harrington. She was 22 years old, the spoiled daughter of Robert Harrington, the real estate tycoon who happened to be Derek's direct superior. I swiped the screen open. The blue light stung my eyes, but the content was far more jarring. A single text message read, "He chose the heir, not the babysitter. Let it go. Old woman." Following the text was a barrage of media files, 50 images downloaded in rapid succession. They were high definition, well lit, and left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Most women might have screamed. They might have thrown the phone across the room or collapsed into a sobbing heap on the floor. I did neither. I felt a physical blow to my chest, certainly, but my brain instantly routed the pain into a different processing center. I am a forensic accountant. I deal in facts, evidence, and trails. I sat up, put on my reading glasses, and walked straight to my home office. I connected my phone to my primary workstation, a dual-monitor setup I used for complex audits. I imported the 50 images. I was not looking at my husband's betrayal anymore. I was looking at a data set. I opened my image analysis software and began to process the metadata. The geolocation tags were sloppy. They were not in Chicago. They were right here in downtown Seattle, at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, specifically the presidential suite. The timestamps showed the photos were taken between 11 o'clock and 1:30 in the morning. I began to zoom in, scanning the background of a selfie Kylie had taken in the bedroom mirror. Derek was in the background, asleep, his arm draped over the edge of the bed, but my focus shifted to the nightstand next to him. There were papers scattered there, sloppy, careless. I enhanced the resolution. The letterhead was unmistakable Harrington Group. I pushed the magnification further. It was a draft for an urban zoning proposal that had not been made public yet. In another photo, taken from a high angle, a folder marked "Confidential" was lying open next to a bottle of champagne. My heartbeat slowed down. This was no longer just adultery. This was corporate espionage and potentially insider trading. Derek was sleeping with the boss's daughter, and he was stupid enough to bring sensitive merger documents to their tryst. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out 3 external hard drives. I copied every single photo and the extracted metadata to all 3 drives simultaneously. Then, I uploaded a 4th copy to an encrypted cloud server in Switzerland that I used for my most sensitive cases. I created a new master folder for the files. I did not name it Derek or divorce. I typed 2 words, Project Destruction. Once the progress bars hit 100%, I stood up and walked down the hall to the nursery. The door creaked slightly as I pushed it open. My daughter, Sophie, was 7 years old. She was sound asleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit Derek had bought her when she was 3. Back when he was still the man I thought I loved. I watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest. I needed to be cold. I needed to be precise. If I acted out of emotion, I would lose half of everything I had built to a man who did not respect me. But if I acted like the professional I was, I would strip him of his reputation, his career, and his freedom. I closed the door silently. The audit had begun. I sat at my desk, the blue glow of the monitors illuminating the room as the only source of light. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the practiced speed of 20 years in the industry. I ran a specialized EXIF data extraction tool on the batch of photos Kylie had sent. The digital footprint was screaming at me. Every single photo was geotagged to the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, specifically the presidential suite. I cross-referenced the booking time with the credit card alerts I monitored for my household. There it was. A charge of $5,000 was processed yesterday, not on our personal card, but on the Harrington Group corporate expense account assigned to Derek. He was billing his affair to the company owned by his mistress's father. I opened image number 12 to scrutinize the details. It was a mirror selfie of Kylie in a silk robe, posing with a pout. In the reflection, Derek was pacing near the window, phone pressed to his ear, but I was not interested in his posture. I zoomed in 400% on the coffee table in the foreground. The resolution held. Laying open was a large format blueprint titled Project Emerald City Phase 2. I froze. That was the classified urban development plan Harrington Group had been guarding for years, a project worth billions that was strictly confidential. Why was it there? Then it clicked. Derek was not just sleeping with Kylie, he was mining her. He was using her access to extract proprietary information to sell to competitors. This was textbook insider trading. I minimized the image viewer and logged into our joint bank accounts. The numbers were bleeding red. Over the last 6 months, there were transfers labeled venture capital investment amounting to $250,000. I traced the routing numbers through my database. They did not go to a brokerage firm. They went to a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. He was not investing. He was funneling our life savings out of the country before serving me papers. It was 3:30 in the morning, but I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah. She was the most vicious divorce attorney in the state and my former college roommate. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy but alert. I told her everything in 3 concise sentences. I told her I needed a forensic preservation order and a filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and financial fraud. Sarah did not ask if I was okay. She just said she would have the papers ready by 8 o'clock. I opened a new spreadsheet to consolidate the timeline. Column A listed Derek's stated location. Column B listed his actual location based on Kylie's photo metadata. I went back 6 months. His business trip to Chicago matched a weekend at a winery in Napa with Kylie. A late-night board meeting aligned perfectly with a time-stamped dinner receipt from a French bistro in the city. The pattern was undeniable. He had not been working late a single day in half a year. Then I saw it. In image 45, Derek was raising a glass of champagne. On his wrist sat a vintage Rolex Submariner with a custom navy dial. My breath hitched for the first time that night. That watch was currently supposed to be sitting in the hidden safe in my closet, wrapped in velvet. It was his anniversary gift for next month. I stood up, walked to the closet, and spun the combination. It was empty. He had not just cheated. He had stolen the gift I bought with my own bonuses to wear it while sleeping with his mistress. I returned to the desk as the sun began to gray the sky outside. I hit print. The laser printer hummed rhythmically, spitting out high-gloss pages of evidence. Charts, photos, bank statements, and metadata reports accumulated in the tray. I took the stack of warm paper and placed it into a leather-bound binder. I organized it with tabbed dividers, just like I would for a federal audit. It was heavy, substantial, and lethal. This was not a scrapbook of a broken marriage. It was a professional portfolio of his destruction. I stared at the leather binder on my desk, struggling to reconcile the criminal inside those pages with the man I married 15 years ago. We started with nothing but student debt and a shared studio apartment that smelled of stale coffee. I was the one who worked double shifts at a mid-tier accounting firm to pay for his MBA tuition. I was the one who edited his essays and rewrote his resume until it was perfect enough to get him an interview at the Harrington Group. He was ambitious then, but he was kind. He used to leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror thanking me for believing in him when no one else did. However, somewhere along the line, that ambition curdled into greed. As he climbed the corporate ladder, he became intoxicated by the proximity to extreme wealth. The sticky notes stopped. They were replaced by complaints that my car was too old to be seen in the company parking lot, or that my choice of wine was embarrassing at dinner parties. He became obsessed with the appearance of success rather than the substance of it, terrified that his peers would discover he came from a humble background. His mother, Brenda, was the architect of this dissatisfaction. She was a woman who believed she was aristocracy despite having a bank account that said otherwise. She never missed an opportunity to remind Derek that he could have done better. She would sit at my dining table, eating the food I paid for, and make passive-aggressive comments about my family's blue-collar roots. She constantly compared me to the glittering socialites she saw in magazines, intentionally planting the seed in Derek's head that he deserved a trophy wife to match his rising status, not a partner who actually worked for a living. The cruelty of his choice was not just in the act, but in the partner he chose. Kylie Harrington was not a stranger to me. 3 years ago, she was an intern in my department. I had taken her under my wing because I saw a lost girl trying to navigate her father's shadow. I taught her how to read a balance sheet and how to survive corporate politics. I treated her like the little sister I never had, buying her lunch when she was upset about a breakup and giving her career advice. To think that while I was mentoring her, she was eyeing my husband as her next conquest made my stomach turn. The signs had been there, glaring at me like neon lights I chose to ignore. There was the scent of a floral perfume that was too young and too sweet for me, lingering on his suit jackets. There were the late-night phone calls he took on the balcony, speaking in hushed tones. Worst of all was his indifference toward Sophie. He stopped reading her bedtime stories months ago, claiming he was too exhausted from work. Yet the timestamps in my evidence file proved he had the energy to stay out until 3 a.m. at bars with Kylie. I realized with a jolt of clarity that I had been so focused on building my career and being a good mother that I forgot to protect my own dignity. I had assumed our shared history was enough to sustain our marriage. I was wrong. As I sat there in the silence of the early morning, the heavy grief in my chest began to evaporate. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was no longer heartbroken. I was disgusted. Derek was not a tragic figure who fell out of love. He was a parasite. He had used my financial support to build a foundation and was now trying to burn the house down with me inside. He was a man who bit the hand that fed him, and he was about to learn that the hand could also strike back with devastating force. The front door opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. Derek dragged his suitcase into the hallway, offering a performance worthy of an Academy Award. He rubbed his temples, feigning the specific exhaustion that comes from a red-eye flight from Chicago. Even though I knew he had driven 15 minutes from the Fairmont Hotel, I was waiting in the kitchen, not with accusations, but with the smell of freshly brewed dark roast coffee and sizzling bacon. I played the part of the doting wife perfectly. I asked him about the weather in the Midwest and listened to him lie about a non-existent thunderstorm that had delayed his takeoff. Just as we sat down, the doorbell rang. It was Brenda. She did not believe in calling ahead. She swept into the kitchen, her gaze immediately locking onto a stray toy Sophie had left near the island. She picked it up with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated waste and dropped it into the toy bin. She started her usual lecture about how a disorganized home produces disorganized children and how in her day, wives took pride in maintaining order. I just poured her a cup of tea and smiled. Then I saw it. Derek had taken off his jacket, revealing a silk tie with a distinct paisley pattern. It was the same tie I had seen lying on the carpet in image number 22 of my evidence file. I reached out and smoothed the fabric against his chest. I complimented him on the choice and asked if it was new. Derek stiffened. His coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. He stammered that he had picked it up at the airport duty-free shop because he had spilled coffee on his other one. I told him it suited him perfectly. letting the silence stretch just long enough to make him sweat before turning back to my breakfast. I waited for them to relax before I dropped the real bomb. I casually mentioned that the mail had arrived early and we had received a heavy, gold-embossed envelope. I slid the invitation across the marble counter. It was for the 40th wedding anniversary of Robert and Eleanor Harrington. I watched the color drain from both of their faces. Derek nearly choked on his toast. Brenda set her tea down with a clatter. They immediately launched a coordinated defense. Derek said I would hate it because it would be full of boring executives talking shop. Brenda chimed in, claiming that my department store dress sense would stand out in the wrong way among the Seattle elite. She told me I would feel out of place and uncomfortable. They were desperate to keep me away from the scene of the crime. I took a slow sip of my coffee and shook my head. I told them that I actually had to go. I explained that a potential client would be there, someone vital for my own consulting targets, and it would look unprofessional if I missed the opportunity to network. I framed it as a career necessity, knowing Derek could not argue against business logic without sounding suspicious. He was trapped. He had to agree. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it under the table. It was a text from Kylie. She must have heard the news from Derek immediately. The message read, "Do not show your face there, you old hag. Stay home where you belong." I did not get angry. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I typed a reply with steady fingers. "See you there. Make sure you dress well." I locked the phone and looked up at my husband and mother-in-law, flashing them my brightest, most dangerous smile. The stage was set. I drove to my office at Vanguard Analytics with the focus of a soldier heading to the front lines. My workspace was a sanctuary of logic and order, a stark contrast to the chaos Derek had introduced into my life. I spent the morning finalizing the forensic report. I cross-referenced the unauthorized withdrawals with the timestamps from the hotel photos. I built a timeline that was irrefutable. The final document was not just a divorce filing, it was a roadmap of financial crimes that would interest the Securities and Exchange Commission just as much as it would interest a family court judge. At noon, I met with a private investigator I had hired 24 hours prior. We met in his car in the parking lot of a nondescript diner. He handed me a flash drive containing surveillance footage. I plugged it into my laptop immediately. The video was crystal clear. It showed Derek and Kylie sitting on the patio of a bistro, laughing and drinking wine with the CEO of Harrington Group's biggest competitor. They were handing over a thick envelope. This was the final piece of the puzzle. It proved that Derek was not just a cheater, he was a corporate traitor selling out the man he called a father figure. After securing the evidence, I went to the shopping district. I did not go to the sensible department stores where I usually bought my work suits. I went to a high-end boutique known for aggressive fashion. I walked past the racks of polite black dresses and navy gowns. I was not going to this party to mourn my marriage. I was going there to burn it down. I selected a floor-length silk gown in a shade of blood red so vibrant it seemed to hum with energy. It was structured, backless, and commanded attention. It cost $2,000. I swiped Derek's credit card with a sense of grim satisfaction. My next stop was a salon I had visited only once before for a gala. I told the stylist to forget the practical bob I had worn for a decade. I wanted volume. I wanted waves. I had a makeup artist apply sharp-winged eyeliner and a matte red lipstick that matched the dress perfectly. When I looked in the mirror, the tired, accommodating wife was gone. Staring back at me was a woman who looked dangerous. I returned home to prepare the final component of my plan. I took the leather-bound portfolio containing the photos, the bank statements, and the printouts of the insider trading logs. I wrapped it carefully in silver paper and tied it with a navy blue ribbon. To anyone else, it looked like an expensive coffee table book, a thoughtful anniversary gift for the Harringtons. I placed it gently in my bag. Before the storm hit, I needed to ensure the safety of the only innocent person in this mess. I drove Sophie to my sister's house in the suburbs. I told her that Mommy and Daddy had a boring grown-up party to attend, and that she would have a slumber party with her cousins for 2 days. I hugged her tighter than usual, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, grounding myself in the reason why I was doing this. I was fighting for her future. When I returned to the house to get dressed, Derek was already there, adjusting his tuxedo. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes widened, scanning the red dress and the professional makeup. For a moment, I saw a flicker of lust mixed with confusion. Then, his expression settled into arrogance. He smirked, adjusting his cufflinks, and told me he was glad I was finally making an effort to look the part. He actually believed I was dressing up to compete for his attention. He thought I was desperate to keep him. I simply smiled at him in the mirror, a cold, tight smile that did not reach my eyes. While he went downstairs to start the car, I made one final phone call. I dialed the number of the technical director at the Grand Seattle Hotel. I had audited the hotel's payroll 2 years ago and helped him uncover a manager who was stealing from the staff tip pool. He owed me a favor. I asked him for the access code to the ballroom projection system and the Wi-Fi protocol for the main stage. He hesitated for a second before giving me the digits. I wrote them down on the palm of my hand. I had the weapon, I had the ammunition, and now I had the keys to the battlefield. The Grand Seattle Hotel ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, smelling of expensive perfume and old money. It was the kind of room where decisions that affected the city's skyline were made over glasses of vintage champagne. As we walked through the gilded double doors, the air buzzed with the chatter of senators, tech moguls, and the city's elite. Beside me, Derek was unraveling. I could feel the heat radiating from him, and a bead of sweat trickled down his temple despite the air conditioning. He was terrified. He had spotted the receiving line. Robert and Eleanor Harrington stood at the entrance, flanking their daughter like royalty presenting a princess. Kylie was wearing a floor-length white chiffon gown that was aggressively innocent. She looked angelic, the picture of the dutiful, sweet daughter. When her eyes landed on me, however, the angel vanished. Her gaze was sharp, filled with a mixture of contempt and triumphant glee. She looked at my red dress as if it were a stain on her perfect evening. We approached them. Robert Harrington, a man who controlled half the commercial real estate in downtown, bypassed me completely to grip Derek's hand in a two-handed shake. He clapped Derek on the shoulder, beaming with a paternal pride that made my stomach churn. They treated him like family, or perhaps like a favored investment. When they finally acknowledged me, it was with the polite indifference one reserves for a distant relative or hired help. Eleanor gave me a limp handshake and a tight smile, her eyes already drifting past me to someone more important. I moved deeper into the room and saw another familiar face I had not expected. Brenda was holding court near the bar, clutching a martini glass. Derek had clearly invited her behind my back to witness his ascension. She was whispering to a group of women, gesturing toward me with a sneer. I could practically hear the words leaving her mouth, telling them that her son was finally upgrading and that I would soon be history. I met her gaze and raised my chin. She frowned, clearly unsettled by the fact that I was not cowering in a corner. Instead of retreating, I went on the offensive. I knew half the people in this room from my professional life. I had audited the books for the man standing near the orchestra and saved the woman by the ice sculpture millions in a merger due diligence process. I moved through the crowd with the grace of a shark in familiar waters. I shook hands firmly, laughed at jokes, and introduced Derek as my husband with a possessive, confident tone that confused him. He kept glancing at me, trying to decode my behavior. He expected a weeping victim, but he was walking next to a queen. Kylie could not stand it. She had expected me to be invisible, but I was the one drawing eyes in my blood-red gown. As I made my way toward the bar to get a sparkling water, she intercepted me. She moved quickly, pretending to stumble so she could body-check me. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of sugary cocktails, and dropped the act completely. She whispered that I was stubborn and pathetic for showing up. She hissed that Derek was going home with her tonight and that I should just accept my defeat. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked down at her, examining her face as if I were inspecting a flaw in a financial ledger. I leaned in just enough so only she could hear me. I told her to enjoy the moment. I told her to savor it because this was her very last dinner as the Harrington heiress. Then I stepped around her and walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth slightly open, looking less like a winner and more like a child who had just realized she was playing a game she did not understand. The clinking of silverware against fine china died down as the lights dimmed slightly for the speeches. Robert Harrington took the stage first. He looked every inch the titan of industry, yet his eyes softened when they landed on his daughter. He raised a glass of vintage scotch and declared that the last 40 years would have been meaningless without his family. He called Kylie his sole pride and joy, the future of the Harrington legacy. Then came the announcement that made the room buzz with envy. He declared that effective immediately, Kylie would be taking over operations for the entire West Coast division. Kylie beamed, feigning humility while her eyes glittered with greed. She squeezed her mother's hand, playing the part of the devoted successor perfectly. Then, it was Derek's turn. Robert invited him to the microphone, introducing him as the employee of the year and a man he had come to regard as a son. Derek buttoned his tuxedo jacket and stepped into the spotlight. He looked confident, fueled by the adoration of the room and the secret adrenaline of his affair. He spoke about loyalty. He actually used the word integrity. He lectured a room full of billionaires about how hard work and ethical standards were the pillars of success. I watched him from my table near the back, swirling the dark red wine in my glass. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy. He was preaching about moral compasses while wearing a stolen watch and sleeping with the boss's daughter. I reached into my beaded clutch. My fingers brushed against the cold, smooth plastic of a universal presentation remote. I had paired it with the system earlier when the technician gave me access. I did not press it yet. I wanted the moment to be perfect. I wanted them to feel safe one last time. The master of ceremonies returned to the stage as Derek stepped back to stand beside Robert. The MC announced that there was one final treat before the dancing began. He said that a group of close friends had put together a special video tribute to celebrate the family's journey. Kylie's smile widened into a smirk. She sat up straighter, adjusting the neckline of her white dress. I could see the triumph in her posture. She believed this was a montage she had likely orchestrated herself, a reel of her best moments designed to solidify her new position of power. She looked around the room, soaking in the attention, ready to be worshipped. A massive projection screen began to descend from the ceiling, humming softly as it lowered behind the stage. The chandeliers dimmed until the ballroom was plunged into a heavy, anticipatory darkness. All eyes were fixed forward. The silence was thick. Derek stood there in the shadows of the stage, his teeth gleaming in the faint light, his chest puffed out. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble. He thought he had won. He thought I was just the foolish wife sitting in the dark. I set my wineglass down on the table with a deliberate, soft clink. I stood up. The silk of my red dress rustled like a warning whisper. I did not look at the screen. I walked slowly, rhythmically, toward the audio-visual control booth at the rear of the room. The heels of my shoes sank into the plush carpet, silencing my approach. I reached the edge of the booth and locked eyes with the technician I had bribed with professional favors. He looked nervous, but he held his ground. I gave him a single, sharp nod. I raised the remote in my hand, my thumb hovering over the play button. The theater was ready. The audience was seated. It was time to start the show. The music did not start. Instead, the massive screen behind the stage flickered to life with blinding clarity. There were no childhood photos, no montages of family vacations. The first image was 20 feet tall. It was high definition and undeniable. It showed Kylie and Derek tangled together on the sheets of the presidential suite. But the focal point was not their nudity. It was the documents fanned out around them like playing cards. The red confidential stamp of the Harrington Group was clearly visible on the files resting against Derek's thigh. A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the room. It was a physical sound, a sharp intake of breath from 300 people simultaneously. The crystal glass in Robert Harrington's hand slipped. It shattered against the hardwood floor, the sound of breaking glass echoing like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Eleanor Harrington froze, her hand covering her mouth, her face draining of all color as she stared at her naked daughter looming over the ballroom. I pressed the button again. The image changed. This time, it was a screenshot of the text message Kylie had sent me at 2 a.m. The font was huge, making every cruel word impossible to miss. The message detailing how she was siphoning money from her parents to fund her lover was projected for every shareholder, board member, and family friend to read. The phrase, "He chose the heir, not the babysitter," hung in the air, stripping away every layer of her innocent daughter act. I hit the button for the third time. The screen shifted to a forensic accounting spreadsheet. It was a complex web of numbers, but I had highlighted the relevant columns in red. It showed the wire transfers and traced the sale of the confidential bid information to Harrington's direct competitor. Crucially, it displayed the kickback fee of $2 million deposited into an offshore account under both of their names. The room erupted into chaos. This was not just scandal, it was felony fraud. On stage, Derek looked like a man who had been shot. The blood left his face so completely he looked gray. He snapped out of his shock and lunged toward the AV cables running along the side of the stage, desperate to kill the feed. But he did not make it. 2 large men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows. I had hired private security for this exact moment. They blocked his path, crossing their arms like stone walls. Derek bounced off them, stumbling back, trapped in the spotlight of his own crimes. "Turn it off, you crazy bitch!" Kylie screamed. Her voice cracked, shrill and hysterical. She abandoned her parents and charged toward the control booth where I stood. She was fast, fueled by panic, but her heavy gown was not made for running. She caught her heel in the hem of her dress and went down hard. She sprawled on the carpet in a heap of white chiffon, looking less like a princess and more like a broken doll. I picked up the microphone from the console. My voice was steady, amplified to boom across the cavernous hall, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "Happy 40th anniversary, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington," I said. "Your daughter has not only been sleeping with my husband, but she has also been selling your company piece by piece to your rivals." I pressed the button one final time. The spreadsheet vanished. A video began to play. It was the footage from the hidden camera I had placed. The audio was crisp. It showed Derek and Kylie clinking champagne glasses in a hotel room. They were laughing. "The old man is senile," Derek's voice rang out, distorted but recognizable. "He has no idea we are bleeding him dry." Kylie laughed with him, calling her father a dinosaur who deserved to be extinct. The image froze on their mocking faces, looming over the devastated parents below. The silence that followed the video was short-lived. It was broken not by applause, but by the sound of Robert Harrington's hand connecting with my husband's face. The slap was violent and echoing, a physical manifestation of a betrayal that ran deeper than business. Derek stumbled back, clutching his cheek, his eyes wide with a fear I had never seen in him before. Robert was purple with rage, his chest heaving as he screamed at the man he had once groomed for greatness, calling him a parasite and a thief in front of the entire city. Eleanor Harrington, who had spent decades turning a blind eye to her daughter's behavior, finally reached her breaking point. She did not rush to comfort Kylie. Instead, she looked at the girl sprawled on the floor as if she were a stranger. When Kylie reached out a trembling hand toward her mother, Eleanor took a step back. She turned to her personal assistant standing nearby and spoke with a voice like chipped ice. She ordered every single account associated with Kylie to be frozen immediately. She declared that the credit cards were to be canceled before the sun came up, before the family drama could escalate further. The double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. My attorney, Sarah, had timed the notification perfectly. A team of federal agents and economic crime detectives swarmed into the room. They moved with practiced efficiency. parting the sea of tuxedos and ball gowns. They marched straight for the stage. Derek was still reeling from the slap when the cold steel of handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The reality of the situation crashed down on him. He was not just losing his job, he was losing his freedom. He looked out into the crowd, his eyes frantically searching until they locked onto mine. He shouted my name. He begged me to explain to them that it was a misunderstanding, pleading for me to help him. I stood motionless in my red dress, watching him with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. I did not speak. I simply stared at him until the hope in his eyes died out, replaced by the crushing realization that I was the architect of his downfall. Kylie was faring no better. She was sobbing now, mascara running down her face, screaming for her father to stop the police. But Robert Harrington had turned his back on her. He gestured to the hotel security, not the police, and ordered them to remove her from the premises. He said he did not want to see her face. 2 guards hoisted the weeping heiress up by her arms and dragged her toward the exit, her white dress bunching up around her ankles, her humiliation absolute. In the periphery of the chaos, Brenda let out a strangled gasp. Watching her golden son being led away in cuffs was too much for her fragile delusion of grandeur. She clutched her chest and collapsed onto the floor in a dead faint. The most telling moment of the night was that no one moved to help her. The socialites she had tried so hard to impress simply stepped back to avoid her falling body, leaving her lying there alone on the carpet. The room was buzzing with a different kind of energy now. I saw executives pulling out their phones, making urgent calls to pull their capital from projects Derek had been managing. They were cutting ties with the Harrington Group's compromised assets. However, as I walked past a table of investors, a CEO I recognized raised his glass to me. He nodded, acknowledging the brutal efficiency of the audit I had just presented. I had saved them millions by exposing the rot, and in this world, that earned respect. I walked over to the main table where Robert and Eleanor stood, looking aged and defeated. I placed the microphone gently on the white tablecloth. I picked up a glass of wine that had been abandoned by a fleeing guest. I raised it slightly in their direction. I told them that they should consider this a favor, as I had just saved them from the fraud of the century. I did not wait for a response. I turned around and walked out of the ballroom, the heavy doors closing behind me, shutting out the wreckage of the life I used to know. The divorce proceedings were not a battle. They were a slaughter. With the mountain of forensic evidence I had compiled, the judge granted me full legal and physical custody of Sophie without hesitation. I retained the house, my personal savings, and my retirement accounts. Derek was stripped of his assets to pay restitution to the Harrington Group, leaving him with nothing but a pile of legal debt and a public defender. The criminal trial was equally unforgiving. Federal prosecutors do not look kindly upon insider trading, especially when the evidence is wrapped in a bow and delivered by a professional auditor. Derek and Kylie were both sentenced to serve between 5 and 10 years in federal prison. The last I heard, Kylie had been completely cut off by her family. The princess who used to mock my clothes was now working in the prison laundry sector, scrubbing uniforms for 12 cents an hour just to afford shampoo. Robert Harrington tried to make amends. A month after the sentencing, he requested a meeting. He looked 10 years older, his arrogance replaced by exhaustion. He offered me a position as the senior advisor for the internal control board of the Harrington Group, offering a salary triple what I used to make. It was a validation of my skills, but I declined. I told him that I was done cleaning up the messes of powerful men. I was going to build something of my own. I launched my own firm the following week. I named it Phoenix Auditing. My specialty was niche but necessary. I investigated financial fraud within marriages and private partnerships. I became the weapon for spouses who suspected they were being cheated out of their futures. My schedule was booked out for months. Justice eventually found Brenda as well, though it was a tragedy of her own making. During the investigation, the authorities discovered that Derek had manipulated her into co-signing several high-risk business loans to cover his debts. When he went to prison and defaulted, the creditors came for her. She was forced to sell her beloved home to satisfy the banks. She now lives in a small, state-subsidized apartment on the outskirts of the city, alone with her regrets. Life with Sophie became peaceful. One afternoon, we were walking along Alki Beach, watching the gray waves crash against the sand. She held my hand tight and asked me quietly why Daddy could not come home. I did not lie to her, nor did I burden her with the sordid details. I simply told her that her father had made very bad choices and that when adults break big rules, they have to go away for a long time to pay for what they did. She nodded, looking at the ocean, and told me she was glad I made good choices. That was the only validation I needed. Yesterday, a single postcard arrived in the mail. The return address was the Federal Correctional Facility. The handwriting was shaky. It contained only 3 words: "I am sorry." I stood over the kitchen trash can and stared at it. There was a time when those words would have broken me. Now, they felt like a transaction I refused to accept. I dropped the card into the bin among the coffee grounds and eggshells, where it belonged. I sat in my new corner office this morning, looking out over the Seattle skyline. The rain was falling, washing the city clean. My phone vibrated on the mahogany desk. It was a notification from a potential client. The message read, "My husband says he is broke, but I found a receipt for a diamond necklace. Can you help me?" I smiled, picking up the phone. I was not just a survivor anymore. I was a hunter, and I was ready to work. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Derek's punishment. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help us share these stories with more people around the world.